Good morning from Ken Cox at Glendoick. This morning we're going to be looking at fertilisers. This is summertime, it's the time when your plants need feeding, particularly if you've got plants that you've newly planted that you want to get a move on to fill the space, and plants that you've got in containers definitely need feeding. They'll run out of steam otherwise. Now, although there's an enormous range of fertilisers available, basically fertilisers all have the same ingredients in. Most of them are called balanced fertilisers, and they have three main ingredients: nitrogen, phosphorus and potash, NPK, and on the side of a packet you'll see how much of each of these ingredients there is. If you've got vegetables and fruit which need a lot of nitrogen, go for one with a lot of nitrogen in it. And if you're growing things like tomatoes, they like a lot of potash. This one is particularly formulated to have a lot of the K, the last thing of the NPK. You can choose between organic and non-organic fertilisers. We'll start with the non-organic fertilisers. This one is Grow More. If it's not organic, it means it's made in a chemical process, which basically means that by using a lot of heat, nitrogen is fixed using a chemical process. If you'd rather try an organic fertiliser, there's no particular advantage of it. They do more or less the same things, though some people think organic fertilisers are better. These are organic fertilisers. We've got three here: bone meal, fish blood and bone, and chicken manure. Chicken manure is pretty obvious where that comes from. The other two, bone meal and fish blood and bone, are actually abattoir products, so they're what's left from meat processing, where they grind up the bones and the skin and so on. You may find that as an organic gardener you're also a vegetarian and that you don't feel entirely happy about using ground up animals to put on your garden. That's up to you. There is another alternative with seaweed fertilisers. If you'd rather use that, seaweed fertilisers are organic. They're basically made of collecting up seaweed and extracting the minerals and the nitrogen from that. Probably the easiest category of fertiliser to put on your garden are liquid feeds. The great thing about them is you just mix them up in a watering can and water them on the plants. They're particularly good for containers, hanging baskets, things like that. Most of the liquid feeds come with a measuring scoop. This one here, Miracle Grow, is a little dissolving granule. You put 2 heaped measuring scoops into a watering can like that, and it'll dissolve, and then you water it on. A little goes a long way. One box like this costs about £5, and it will do something like 40 big or 80 small watering cans, so you get a lot of feed. And with liquid feed you want to feed every few weeks. Some of the liquid feeds are actually liquid themselves, and they come with a very handy cap like this, and you fill the cap up to a certain level and pour it into the watering can, and that gives you your dosage measurement. All the instructions are on the back. It tells you exactly how much you need. And if you've got a lot of containers, you might want to have one of these. This attaches on the end of a hose. You put the liquid feed in this reservoir here at the bottom, and then you just water on as much as you need until this runs out. So it's just an easy way if you've got a lot of containers to water. So the alternative to liquid feeds are granular feeds. They are basically just little grains with the different kinds of chemical ingredients in the fertilisers. Probably best to use gloves to handle this stuff. Some people get a little bit irritated by it, and you just take a small handful and sprinkle it on around the roots of the plants that you want to feed. This is most useful for plants that are established in the garden, things like roses, rhododendrons, that kind of thing. They're fine. So that's fairly straightforward. The other kind of granular fertiliser that you get is this. This is slow release or continuous release fertiliser. The fertiliser inside here releases very slowly over a season. So you mix up a certain amount of this into your pots when you're planting your bedding in the spring. It should last for months and months and months, slowly letting out the nitrogen all the way through the season. So it means that you don't have to bother liquid feeding and so on. So this is most useful for planting up containers in the spring. You can also use it for tomatoes and other plants that are going to need lots of energy through the season. So hopefully that's made the range of fertilisers that we have on offer at Glendoick a little easier to understand. This is the time to get feeding your garden. I would say the most important months for feeding are probably May, June and July, and then you want to stop feeding most of your shrubs and trees in the garden once you get into August, because those plants have got to stop growing, harden up, ripen their wood and set flower buds for the following year. So if you feed them too late in the season, you'll find sometimes that they'll just produce lots of rather lush growth which may get frosted. So for summertime, that's the time to get feeding your plants, your lawns, and your containers.